DOGE isn't about money, it's about malice.
This town's crooked as a dog's leg. Somebody's going to straighten it out.
Pretending to save money.
Donald Trump's masterpiece.
I mean, Department of Government Evil!
Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has divided the country. Even libertarians like me, who have spent years calling for smaller and less wasteful government, we have some mixed feelings about it.
You couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public.
Some think that Elon Musk and his team are cleaning house, heroically wiping out DC's absurd spending and gargantuan bureaucracy. Plus, they're putting an end to federal initiatives that are like middle fingers in the face of US taxpayers. Like federal funds that went to an opera in Colombia with a trans protagonist, or $1.5 million in federal grants for an LGBT advocacy program in Serbia. Now, on the other hand, some libertarians see DOGE as a dangerous expansion of executive power, that it's more concerned with culture war issues than actually cutting the budget or targeting the popular entitlement programs that are driving the national debt. In reality, maybe the DOGE fans and the DOGE haters are both kind of right.
DOGE.
DOGE.
Perhaps you've heard of it.
I admit, I'm not entirely sure what to think about DOGE, and it might be too soon to draw any final conclusions. But this much seems clear. There's not actually been a single DOGE project. There have been, by my count, at least 3 different versions so far. Think of it like Pokémon. Yeah, like Dogimon. It has evolved from one version to another, and each new version has some things in common with the previous ones, but they're also kinda different. Not long after the election, Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy were appointed to run DOGE. In a Wall Street Journal essay, they vowed to cut $2 trillion in federal spending and to take on the administrative state, which is a sort of broad term for the collection of executive agencies that regulate every aspect of modern American life. By the time Inauguration Day rolled around, it had already evolved. Now Musk was running things by himself, and it was embedded inside the White House. In a wild and chaotic first month, Musk canceled federal contracts, fired some federal workers, and generally shook up the executive branch, even though it was never really clear if he had the legal authority to do any of that.
Your detractors, Mr. Musk,
I have to what?
including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government.
So on one hand, there was a lot of chaos and flagrant misrepresentation. As of this week, DOGE's wall of receipts claims to have cut $105 billion in federal spending. Now that sounds like a big number, but it's really only about 1.5% of the $7 trillion federal budget. And that wall of receipts has overstated the actual savings. One contract worth $8 million was erroneously counted as being worth $8 billion. A lot of the other contracts that DOGE canceled didn't really net any savings for taxpayers either. DOGE claimed that canceling an IT contract in the Social Security Administration saved taxpayers $232 million, but in reality, it only saved about $500,000. Now that's why any serious effort at cutting government spending has to be made at the budgetary level. You have to stop wasteful spending before it starts. Now on the other hand, rooting out a few $1 billion in wasteful spending, well, that's certainly a lot better than continuing to spend wastefully.
I don't think the fact that it's small should detract us from getting rid of it.
That's James Brogel, a senior fellow at the free market nonprofit, the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I asked him to swing by our studio to chat about DOGE because there's probably no other organization that works as hard to understand, track, and challenge the administrative state that has been DOGE's prime target.
It's not going to balance the budget by any means, but I do think that there's a legitimate reason to be looking at spending and looking at every line of spending and say, does this pass a cost-benefit test? Does this do more good than harm? Is this waste?
James argues that the best thing DOGE has done by far is something that might not show up on any balance sheet.
Elon Musk has made regulatory reform, cutting spending, reining in the administrative state and the federal workforce cool.
All government spending is actually taxation. All government spending.
He has this massive platform on X. He makes it engaging, entertaining, funny memes. Some people criticize him, say some of it's misinformation. Maybe he's a little careless sometimes. He retweets something he shouldn't. But he's getting this message out in a way that I certainly never could. It's boring to most people, but he makes this stuff exciting.
He does make it exciting, but I'm not convinced it lives up to the hype. And in just the past few weeks, there have been a handful of injunctions reversing some of Musk's cuts because he may have overstepped his authority. Then, in mid-February, DOGE evolved again. In a new executive order, Trump gave it a new directive: identify and cut all regulations that the executive branch never had the constitutional right to impose in the first place. Which is kind of ironic because DOGE itself has been accused of exceeding its constitutional limits. But even so, this seems like a good development, because when it comes to the regulatory state, there's certainly plenty that needs to be slashed.
The regulatory system we have is really one that just grows uncontrollably. There's just not a break on it. So every year, 3,000 to 5,000 final regulations are put in place, new regulations, and are just added to the code. Right now, the federal regulatory code is about 188,000 pages long. The estimates of cost range, but I would say the credible estimates are in the range of $2 to $4 trillion a year in regulatory costs, on top of federal spending, which is almost $7 trillion a year now. So it's like having another off-the-books federal government imposing costs.
In that new executive order, Trump mandated that DOGE dig through the federal regulatory code to find rules in which the executive branch or DC bureaucrats had overstepped their authority.
If the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have?
Two recent Supreme Court rulings that help reduce the power of the executive branch to write and interpret regulations might help. Even so, I'm not fully convinced that DOGE is the right way to accomplish this, because you can't eliminate costly federal regulations with a tweet or even an executive order.
One of the biggest challenges that's going to face any administration is just that you have to go through the rulemaking process to amend a rule or remove a rule. And that process can take 6 months to a year or more for every single regulation. So if there are tens of thousands of regulations on the books you want to get rid of, then you have to go through that rulemaking process tens of thousands of times.
All of that's going to take a while. Simply firing federal workers doesn't actually reduce regulation. To cut the regulatory state, you have to actually eliminate the rules themselves. So if Musk wants to do more than just collect a bunch of clout on his social media network, then he's got a lot of work to do. Still, he's definitely right about this much.
You can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that is responsive to the people. That's the whole point of a democracy.
DOGE's fans and critics will continue to argue about whether it's revolutionizing government or wrecking important institutions. In reality, it seems like it's somewhere in between those two extremes. Musk's attempt at cutting wasteful spending is a good thing, but it won't be tremendously impactful on the budget. Trimming regulations will be a slow but also very important process. What remains to be seen is whether DOGE has the attention span to make any lasting reforms.